And first up is a rule targeting anti-debugging techniques from the Al-Khaser project. Maybe some of you are aware of this one. So this is specifically focusing on unusual use of the virtual alloc API. And as you may know, Al-Khaser is a well-known open source collection of evasion techniques and also known to be used by malware. And interestingly, it's also being observed in campaigns involving Bumblebee. So there is some crossover with active malware families. And right now, actually, I would like to hand it over to my colleague, Patrick, who can give us a bit more background on the connection between, Bumblebee and this Al-Khaser project. Patrick, maybe a couple of comments, or would you like to share some insights?
Of course, yeah, thank you. So maybe just a couple of facts to highlight here, because we are explicitly tagging one of the techniques that are being implemented in the Al-Khaser project. And in the past, as Ertuğrul already mentioned, it also has been used by other malware families. We have deeply analyzed a loader which is called Bumblebee. Probably all of you are familiar with this one. And the developers behind this family were actually quite lazy. So instead of just thinking of what can we implement to detect sandboxes and try to avoid being analyzed, instead of putting lots of effort into figuring out these ways, they just did their research, right? Whatever, usually researchers are going to do. And they probably just came across the Al-Khaser project on GitHub, which, as Ertuğrul mentioned, is just a huge collection of evasion techniques that are either have been already seen in malware in the past, whereas, most of them are real evasion techniques that have been seen, and some of them are more or less theoretical techniques on how you can detect the sandbox. And they just took all of this code that is already there and copied it into their own development. And voila, with a couple of minutes, they basically have a huge collection of evasion techniques implemented in Bumblebee. And maybe two more side effects that we have for Bumblebee, and maybe you have heard of this, but Bumblebee was part of the Operation Endgame that happened, I think, earlier this year. The botnet and the operations basically were just shut down, and in the end it died. So we haven't seen any activity since then being happening for Bumblebee. However, an interesting observation has been made, I think, a couple of days ago, maybe a week ago, and new samples from Bumblebee have reappeared again. So even though they were shut down, it looks like they have slowly restarted operations, and now they're starting to distribute and spam samples again around, which of course on one side shows the effectiveness of a takedown. It got interrupted for a couple of times, but unfortunately, of course, there's always the risk left that those families are reappearing again. And at least the good news so far, there hasn't been any major changes that we have seen. So they may be still adjusting a bit in the delivery chains, but overall the detections that worked previously seem to still work pretty well on the most recent Bumblebee samples that we have seen a couple of days ago.